What if I told you there's a country where 32-year-old razor-sharp men still live with their mothers and view it as a financial masterclass? Where women in their 40s and 50s are so breathtakingly, criminally beautiful that their aging process is basically a national export alongside Ferrari and Gucci. A place where food is a literal religion and ordering a cappuccino after 11 a.m. will get you judged into oblivion by a barista. Welcome to Italy, where absolute chaos is somehow packaged into effortless glamour. Today, we're exposing it all: the hardcore mom obsession, the fierce hidden matriarchy, the street flirting, and the cultural paradoxes that will blow your mind. In Italy, a 32-year-old man living with his mother isn't automatically seen as immature, but sometimes as surprisingly sensible. Welcome to the world of Mammone, a uniquely Italian word describing a man who remains deeply attached to his mother well into adulthood. Now, before you picture a hopeless mama's boy who can't fry an egg or fold a shirt, reality is much more interesting than the stereotype. In Italy, family isn't just important, it's the center of gravity. Many young adults stay at home longer because housing is expensive, wages have struggled to keep pace with living costs, and close-knit families are simply part of everyday life. If your parents have room, why rush into paying sky-high rent for a tiny apartment just to prove a point? From an Italian perspective, that doesn't always look like independence. Sometimes it just looks financially inefficient. Of course, there is a line. The word mammone isn't used for every man who lives with his parents. It's reserved for someone whose mother still makes every decision, solves every problem, and somehow remains the unofficial CEO of his adult life. Italians can laugh about it because they know the difference between loving your family and never truly leaving the nest. It's one of those cultural paradoxes Italy does so well. In a country celebrated for romance, fashion, and effortless elegance, one of the most enduring love stories may just be between an Italian son and his mother. Here's a survival tip that could save your relationship in Italy. If an Italian woman cooks you dinner, enjoy every bite, and whatever you do, don't say, "My mother's version is better." That innocent little sentence may sound harmless where you're from, but in Italy, it can land with the force of a diplomatic incident. That's because food in Italy is never just food. Every plate of pasta carries family history. Every sauce has a story. Every recipe has been argued over, perfected, and quietly defended across generations. An Italian grandmother doesn't simply pass down ingredients, she passes down identity. So when someone spends hours preparing a meal for you, they're not just feeding your stomach, they're inviting you into a tradition that may be older than the country itself. Ironically, the competition isn't always between strangers. Sometimes it's between two women who genuinely care about the same man, his wife and his mother. Each has her own recipe, her own technique, and absolute confidence that hers is the right one. Whether it's carbonara, lasagna, or Sunday ragu, every family insists they know the authentic way to make it, and they all have convincing arguments. Of course, most Italian families laugh about these culinary rivalries. They're rarely serious feuds, but they're a familiar part of family life. So if you're lucky enough to sit at an Italian dinner table, remember this simple rule: compliment the meal in front of you, admire the passion behind it, and never volunteer a comparison nobody asked for. In Italy, love may begin with food, but peace at the table often depends on knowing exactly what not to say. Imagine stepping out to buy nothing more than a loaf of bread, only to discover you've accidentally walked onto what feels like a fashion runway. Welcome to Italy, where looking presentable isn't about showing off, it's about showing respect. This unwritten philosophy has a name: Bella Figura, or literally, making a beautiful impression. And despite what many people think, it has surprisingly little to do with expensive clothes. Bella Figura isn't a dress code, it's a mindset. Italians believe that how you present yourself reflects how you value yourself, the people around you, and even the spaces you share. A neatly pressed shirt, polished shoes, or a well-fitted jacket isn't necessarily about wealth. It's a quiet statement that says, "I cared enough to make an effort." That's why you'll often see people looking effortlessly elegant while doing the most ordinary things: walking the dog, buying groceries, or meeting friends for a quick espresso. Does that mean Italians never wear sweatpants outside? Of course not. Modern Italy is just as casual as anywhere else. But the cultural expectation is different. Sloppy isn't celebrated. Looking put together is considered a form of everyday courtesy rather than an occasional performance. Perhaps that's the real secret behind Italian style. It's not about chasing the latest trend or wearing designer labels from head to toe. In fact, many Italians would rather own a few timeless pieces than a wardrobe overflowing with fast fashion. Bella Figura is less about impressing strangers and more about carrying yourself with confidence, dignity, and intention. In Italy, elegance isn't reserved for special occasions. It's woven into ordinary life, proving that sometimes the most attractive thing you can wear isn't luxury at all. It's self-respect. What if the world's best anti-aging secret wasn't hidden inside an expensive cream, but in the way an entire country chooses to live? Spend enough time in Italy, and you'll start noticing something remarkable. Women in their 40s, 50s, and well beyond often carry themselves with a confidence that turns heads without ever demanding attention. It's not because they've discovered the fountain of youth. It's because they've mastered something far more powerful: the art of aging without apologizing for it. Contrary to popular myth, there isn't a magical Italian beauty formula. Instead, it's 1,000 ordinary habits repeated over a lifetime. Fresh ingredients instead of heavily processed meals. Olive oil used generously, but never carelessly. Long walks through historic streets that replace countless hours on treadmills. Coffee enjoyed slowly. Lunch shared with family. Stress acknowledged, but rarely allowed to dominate every waking moment. Then there's style. Italian women don't abandon elegance as they grow older. They refine it. Fashion isn't about looking younger than they are. It's about looking like the best version of themselves today. A perfectly tailored coat, a silk scarf, a quality pair of shoes. These choices whisper confidence instead of shouting for attention. Perhaps that's the biggest cultural difference. In many parts of the world, aging is treated like a battle to be won. In Italy, it's often seen as another chapter worth living beautifully. Wrinkles aren't automatically viewed as flaws to erase, but as proof of a life well lived. And maybe that's the real reason Italian women seem so effortlessly captivating. Their greatest beauty secret isn't resisting time, it's making peace with it, then walking forward with unmistakable style. Every evening, just as the golden light begins to wash over Italy's old streets and quiet piazzas, something fascinating happens. Thousands of people leave their homes for an activity so simple it almost sounds pointless. They go for a walk. No destination, no fitness tracker, no rush. This beloved tradition is called La Passeggiata, and once you understand it, you'll realize it's one of the purest expressions of the Italian way of life. On the surface, it's just an evening stroll, but look a little closer, and you'll see that everyone is quietly playing a role. Couples walk hand in hand. Children race across the square. Elderly neighbors catch up on the latest gossip. Friends stop every few steps because every conversation seems more important than arriving anywhere. The piazza transforms into the town's living room, where the entire community comes together without needing an invitation. And yes, appearances matter. People often dress a little better than the occasion requires, not because they're trying to impress strangers, but because showing up well presented is part of showing respect for the moment. In many towns, La Passeggiata has long been a chance to see familiar faces, meet someone new, or simply enjoy being part of the rhythm of everyday life. You could even call it Italy's most relaxed social network, except nobody is staring at a screen. In a world obsessed with moving faster, Italians have preserved a tradition that asks them to do the exact opposite. Slow down, look around, talk to people, enjoy the evening air before the day slips away. La Passeggiata isn't exercise, and it isn't a tourist attraction. It's a daily reminder that sometimes the best part of life isn't getting somewhere. It's sharing the journey, one unhurried step at a time. If you've ever wondered who really runs an Italian family, don't waste your time looking for the loudest person in the room. The real authority is often the woman quietly sitting at the dinner table, making sure everything and everyone is exactly where they should be. She may not raise her voice, but somehow the entire family moves to her rhythm. Italian women have long been known for their elegance, but beneath that effortless style lies something even more impressive: an extraordinary ability to hold a family together. In many households, they're the ones remembering birthdays, organizing Sunday lunches, keeping relatives connected across generations, and making sure traditions don't disappear with time. They are often the invisible thread stitching the entire family together. What's remarkable is that this role rarely comes with dramatic speeches or obvious displays of authority. Instead, it shows up in countless small decisions made every single day. A phone call to an aging parent, a carefully planned holiday gathering, a family recipe preserved exactly as it has been for decades. These quiet acts create a sense of continuity that many Italians consider priceless. Of course, modern Italy has changed. Italian women are business owners, professors, doctors, artists, and political leaders. They build careers while balancing family life, just like women across much of the world. But one cultural expectation has remained surprisingly resilient: the idea that family deserves time, attention, and care. Maybe that's why Italian families often seem so tightly connected. Behind the laughter around the dinner table and the seemingly effortless hospitality is someone who has spent years keeping those relationships alive. Not through control or command, but through patience, memory, and an almost unmatched talent for making people feel that they belong. In Italy, true power isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's simply the person who makes a house feel like home. Italy is famous for passionate love stories. It's the land of Romeo and Juliet, candlelit piazzas, and sunsets that seem designed for proposals. But here's the twist: many young Italians are surprisingly cautious about marriage. Not because they don't believe in love, but because they know love and paperwork are two very different things. For decades, Italy had one of the slowest and most complicated divorce systems in Europe. Until reforms in 2015, many couples had to remain legally separated for years before they could officially end their marriage. Even today, while the process is much faster than it used to be, divorce can still involve legal costs, emotional strain, and plenty of bureaucracy. In a country where government paperwork already has a reputation for testing people's patience, marriage isn't just a romantic commitment, it's also a legal one. That reality has quietly shaped the way many Italians think about relationships. It's increasingly common for couples to live together for years, build careers, buy homes, and even raise children before deciding whether marriage is necessary at all. For many, commitment isn't measured by a wedding certificate, but by the life they've already built together. Of course, Italians still celebrate weddings with unmatched style. When they do say, "I do," it's often surrounded by centuries-old churches, unforgettable food, and enough dancing to keep the celebration going until sunrise. But perhaps that's exactly why they don't rush into it. Marriage is seen as something worth taking seriously. Not because people are afraid of love, but because they understand that ending a marriage can be far more complicated than falling into one. In Italy, romance may happen in an instant. Signing the paperwork? That's the part people tend to think about twice. If you really want to confuse an Italian barista, don't order a cappuccino at 3 in the afternoon. They'll probably still make it for you. But the brief pause, the raised eyebrow, and the silent look of curiosity might tell you everything you need to know. Because in Italy, coffee isn't just a drink, it's a language, and like any language, it comes with grammar that locals understand without ever having to explain it. Take espresso, for example. Italians don't usually nurse it for half an hour while answering emails. They step into a neighborhood cafe, exchange a few words with the barista, drink it in a couple of quick sips while standing at the counter, pay, and continue with their day. The entire ritual often takes only a few minutes, yet somehow it never feels rushed. It's a tiny daily pause that has been perfected over generations. Then there's the famous cappuccino rule. Traditionally, Italians enjoy milk-based coffee in the morning, often alongside a pastry. After a large lunch or dinner, however, many locals switch to espresso instead, believing that a lighter coffee simply suits the meal better. Is anyone going to stop you from ordering a cappuccino after lunch? Of course not. There are no coffee police waiting outside the cafe. But don't be surprised if your order quietly reveals that you're probably not from around here. And that's the beauty of Italian coffee culture. The rules aren't enforced by signs on the wall. They're preserved through habit, tradition, and millions of tiny daily rituals. Every cup tells a story, every cafe has its regulars, and every neighborhood bar feels a little like a community living room. In Italy, coffee isn't about caffeine alone. It's about rhythm, routine, and the quiet pleasure of doing one simple thing exceptionally well. Italy is a country where hands often speak almost as much as words do. A simple movement of the fingers can express excitement, frustration, disbelief, or an entire argument without a single sentence. But among this incredible collection of gestures, there is one sign you should be very careful with: the cornuto. The gesture is simple, extending the index finger and little finger while keeping the other fingers folded. To someone unfamiliar with Italian culture, it may look harmless, just another dramatic Italian hand movement. But in Italy, context changes everything. The cornuto is a deeply insulting gesture because it refers to the idea of being a cornuto, a man whose partner has been unfaithful. And this is where Italian culture becomes fascinating. The meaning goes far beyond the literal gesture. It touches something deeply connected to pride, dignity, and reputation. In a society where family and personal honor have traditionally played a major role, accusing someone of being a cornuto isn't just a joke. It can be seen as a direct attack on their identity. Of course, modern Italians use humor, sarcasm, and gestures constantly, and not every use of the sign will lead to a dramatic confrontation. But when directed at a specific person with the intention of insulting them, it can have serious consequences, including legal disputes in some situations. The cornuto perfectly represents the complexity of Italian communication, a language where a tiny movement can carry centuries of cultural meaning. In Italy, words may be powerful, but sometimes one small gesture can say much more than an entire conversation. So if your hands start talking during an Italian conversation, choose your words carefully, and choose your fingers even more carefully. Imagine waking up at midnight not because of an alarm, but because there is music playing outside your window. You open the curtains and discover a group of musicians standing below, and in the center is your future husband singing directly to you. It sounds like a scene from an old romantic movie, but in parts of Italy, this tradition once existed in real life. It is called La Serenata. The serenata is an old Italian custom, especially associated with southern regions, where a groom would visit his bride-to-be's home before the wedding and perform a song beneath her window. It was his final public declaration of love before the marriage ceremony, a dramatic, emotional moment shared not only by the couple, but often by the entire neighborhood. And naturally, Italy had to make romance slightly theatrical. This was not a simple "I love you" message. There were musicians, passionate lyrics, and sometimes an audience of curious neighbors enjoying the unexpected midnight performance. The bride was traditionally expected to appear at the window after hearing the song, accepting the gesture and making the moment complete. But like many old traditions, the word Mammone isn't used for every man who lives with his parents. It is not a strict requirement before marriage, and many couples only recreate it as a romantic surprise or a celebration of local heritage. Nobody is officially judging a groom's singing ability anymore, although a terrible performance might still become a family story for years. What makes La Serenata fascinating is that it captures something very Italian: the belief that love should not only be felt, but expressed. In a world where romance is often reduced to a message on a screen, this tradition reminds us of a time when love was loud, public, and impossible to ignore. In Italy, sometimes the path to forever begins with a song echoing through a quiet street at midnight. Italy is a country full of contradictions. It gave the world powerful women in politics, science, art, and business, yet its television history also created one of the most debated symbols of beauty culture, the Veline. The word comes from the famous Italian satirical television show Striscia la Notizia, where Veline traditionally referred to young female performers who appeared alongside the male hosts. Their role was often focused on entertainment, dancing, presenting visual segments, and adding energy to the show. For many viewers, they became one of the most recognizable images of Italian television. At first glance, it may seem like just another variety show tradition, but beneath the glamorous outfits and bright studio lights was a much bigger conversation. Critics argued that the Veline image reduced women to appearance and turned beauty into a form of television currency. It raised uncomfortable questions about how media chooses to represent women and whether being seen is the same as being valued. But the story is more complicated than the stereotype. Many former Veline used their television exposure as a stepping stone into broader careers, becoming presenters, actresses, entrepreneurs, and public figures. The role itself did not define every person who held it. What makes the Veline phenomenon interesting is not simply the idea of beautiful women on television, it is the contrast between two sides of Italian culture. A society that often celebrates women as the emotional and intellectual center of family life, while also having a long history of using beauty as a powerful part of entertainment. And perhaps that is the most Italian part of all. Nothing is ever just one thing. Behind the glamour, there is always a debate. Behind the beauty, there is always a story. What if the most famous love story in history created a job that never existed in the original story? Welcome to Verona, the city where Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet transformed from a tragic romance into something surprisingly real. Thousands of people from around the world still write letters to Juliet, and someone actually answers them. Inside Verona is a group known as the Secretaries of Juliet, volunteers who receive letters addressed to Juliet from people searching for advice, comfort, or simply someone who will listen. These letters come from every corner of the planet. Some are about heartbreak, some are about impossible love. Others are just personal stories that people feel they need to share with someone who represents the idea of love itself. The most fascinating part is that these letters are not treated as jokes. The volunteers carefully read them and respond with kindness, often writing back as if Juliet were still the person receiving them. It is not therapy, and they are not professional counselors. It is something much more unusual, a human tradition built around empathy. The entire idea sounds almost impossible. A fictional character from a centuries-old play somehow became a symbol powerful enough that strangers still trust her with their deepest emotions. A story that was never proven to be real created a community that is completely real. And maybe that's the magic of Verona. The city understands something that modern life often forgets. People don't only need solutions, they need to feel heard. In a world of instant messages and endless scrolling, there is something strangely beautiful about a handwritten letter traveling across the world, finding its way to a city of romance and receiving a thoughtful reply. Because sometimes, even a fictional love story can inspire something very real. Walk through certain Italian streets, and you may notice something that feels almost like a scene from another era. A confident glance, a dramatic compliment, a quick smile from a stranger passing by. Italy has long had a reputation for expressive flirting, where emotions are not hidden behind layers of hesitation. In Italian culture, communication has always been a performance, and sometimes the street itself becomes the stage. This old style of flirting is often linked to the idea of pappagallismo, a term describing the behavior of men who try to charm women in public with words, attention, and exaggerated confidence. The name comes from pappagallo, meaning parrot, a playful way of describing someone who talks a lot and tries to impress. To outsiders, this can look like the ultimate Italian stereotype: passionate, fearless, and slightly theatrical. A man may act as if he is delivering a scene from a romantic movie, even when he has known the person for only 5 seconds. There is confidence, humor, and a belief that showing interest openly is better than staying silent. But modern Italy is more complicated than the old stereotype. What previous generations may have considered charming is now viewed differently by many people. A compliment can be appreciated, but staring, unwanted comments, or aggressive attention are increasingly criticized as disrespectful rather than romantic. And perhaps that is the interesting part of Italian social culture. The line between charm and annoyance is often defined by context. The same confidence that makes someone charismatic can become uncomfortable when there is no respect behind it. So yes, Italy remains a country of dramatic gestures, expressive conversations, and people who wear their emotions closer to the surface. But true Italian charm was never just about being noticed. It was always about knowing how to connect. In the end, the most impressive move isn't the loudest one. It's the one that shows you actually understand the person in front of you. Italy is a country that seems to have mastered a contradiction that should not work. Trains may run late, paperwork can feel like a never-ending adventure, and every city has its own unique way of turning a simple journey into a story. Yet somehow, this is also the same country that created Ferrari, Gucci, Prada, world-famous cuisine, and some of the most admired designs on Earth. Welcome to the Italian paradox, beautiful chaos. For many visitors, Italy can feel confusing at first. The systems may not always operate with the precision of a Swiss clock. Government changes, bureaucracy, and everyday logistics have often been criticized for being complicated. A simple task that should take 10 minutes can sometimes become a test of patience, paperwork, and emotional endurance. But then you walk through a historic street taste a perfectly made dish, see a handcrafted piece of fashion, or watch someone transform a simple coffee into a daily ritual, and suddenly the chaos starts making sense. Because Italy has never been obsessed with perfection in the mechanical sense. It is not always about making everything faster, smoother, and more efficient. Instead, Italian culture has often focused on making certain things deeply meaningful: food, beauty, craftsmanship, relationships, and the pleasure of everyday life. This is why a country that can argue passionately over the correct way to make pasta can also produce some of the world's greatest engineers and designers. It is a place where creativity sometimes grows from imperfection rather than despite it. Italy reminds us that life does not always need to be perfectly organized to be extraordinary. Sometimes the most memorable experiences come from the unexpected turns. The delayed train that leads to a new conversation. The tiny restaurant you discover by accident. The street that wasn't on your map but becomes your favorite. Maybe that's the real Italian philosophy. Not controlling every moment, but making every moment worth remembering. In Italy, even the chaos has style. Every year, when March arrives in Italy, the streets suddenly turn bright yellow. Flower shops fill with small golden blossoms, and people carry them through cities, restaurants, and workplaces. But unlike many places where roses dominate celebrations of love, Italy has chosen a completely different symbol for International Women's Day: the mimosa flower. At first glance, it seems like an unusual choice. The mimosa is not the most expensive flower, and it does not have the dramatic elegance of a rose. But that is exactly why it became so meaningful. In 1946, Italian women's rights activists chose mimosa as the symbol of March 8th because it was easy to find, affordable, and naturally blooming around that time of year. It was a flower that everyone could share, not just the wealthy. Over time, the mimosa became much more than a simple gift. It became a symbol of recognition, independence, and solidarity. Italian men often give mimosa flowers to women in their lives. Mothers, partners, friends, and colleagues, not simply as a romantic gesture, but as a way of acknowledging their importance. And perhaps the most interesting part of this tradition is how it reflects a deeper Italian idea. Beauty does not always have to be luxurious to be powerful. A small yellow flower, growing freely in nature, became a national symbol carried by millions. Of course, modern celebrations of March 8th in Italy vary. Some women celebrate with friends, dinners, or special events. Others use the day as an opportunity to talk about equality, women's achievements, and social issues. It is not just about receiving flowers. It is about remembering the meaning behind them. Because in Italy, even a simple branch of mimosa carries a story. It represents the idea that strength can be delicate, elegance can be simple, and sometimes the smallest things leave the biggest impression. So that's the Italian paradox. The country that gave us supercar engines, couture fashion, and the ultimate rule that if life isn't packed with pleasure, beauty, and carbs, you're doing it wrong. It's a place where 40% of adults live at home because, honestly, why leave when your mom's cooking is legally a weapon? It's where women don't fade with age. They just become more formidable, walking through a golden hour passeggiata with a kind of confidence that makes it impossible to look away. Italy isn't a vacation, it's a wake-up call. If this made you want to book a flight to Rome or Naples immediately, smash that like button. Your gut is right. Hit subscribe to actually see the world past the tourist brochures. Drop a comment. Have you witnessed the mama obsession? Did we do the MILF topic justice? Let me know. I read everything. See ya.